Hey there. Welcome back to the Equanimity Masterclass, where we're considering that little known word equanimity and why it needs to make a comeback in the world right now. And so today we're going to continue and we're going to have another look, a deeper look into equanimity in action. Now, one of the things that we as human beings really struggle with is paradox, holding two apparently opposing concepts in our mind at the same time. We always think that we have to choose between them. Like when you review that homework from the previous sessions and you saw things were potentially good or potentially bad. And if you look at a situation, you can kind of see that actually you could have a view on it that it turned out good, and you could look at it through a different lens, slightly different, evaluate the details differently and see that actually it wasn't so good. And then you think, well, which one is right? Which is the right answer? Was it good or bad? Instead of recognizing the possibility that maybe it's both. Maybe it can be both at the same time. Because I'm sure if I gave that scenario to a debating team or two debating teams, and I said to the one team, you guys have to argue that this was a good outcome, and you guys have to argue that that was a bad outcome. And I'm pretty sure that both teams, each team would be able to find all the evidence and arguments and angles to justify that point of view. And which one would be right? Well, one day we might vote this team the winner, and another day we might vote that team the winner. Is either one right? Or are they both right? The way this often plays out for us in our personal experience is that we receive advice or information or have an insight, and then we're reluctant to act on it. We actually ultimately reject it because we feel like it's going to make me wrong and everything about the way that I've done things wrong, and now I have to go and do completely the opposite. Instead of being able to have an integrated approach. So we're very much black or white, either or, instead of both and. And equanimity provides a great example of this. You know, when people hear the message of mindfulness or equanimity, then they tend to think, okay, so I'm not in control of everything, so therefore does it mean that I'm in control of nothing and I should do nothing and I should just sit back and wait and be all shoo like a hippie going groovy man all day. But a better way to see it is described by this phrase, that you act 100% and you allow 100%. So let's have a look at that. First, let's look at allow. What do we mean by that? We mean that you allow things to be as they are right now, without resisting or without judging things as they are right now. After all, what's the point? They are as they are. How can you do that? Firstly, by recognizing that things change on their own anyway. So we're not saying that you have to be satisfied with this reality forever and ever. No. Recognizing, as we did in the previous session, that things change on their own anyway means that you can take things as they are right now, allow them to be as they are right now, trusting that things will change. Let's take an example. Let's say you have toothache. Now, if you have toothache, eventually, even if you do nothing, and I'm not advocating that you do nothing, this is just an example, the toothache will go away. Firstly, it'll change. The pain comes and goes, ebbs and flows. If you've ever spent time just neutrally observing pain, you see that it ebbs and flows of its own accord. And secondly, the toothache might heal itself, or maybe the tooth falls out and the pain goes away. But guess what? If that tooth does fall out, then there'll be some other problem in your life. The car tire is flat. And then when that's resolved, some other problem, and then some other problem. So if you can't be with things as they are right now, then guess what? Life is just one long problem. And you are in resistance to that. You're a ball of resistance or stress as a result of your resistance or opposition or refusal to accept that about life. On the other hand, when you allow things to be as they are right now, trusting that they'll change, knowing in the background that new problems will arise, which also will change, then you're at one with life. You're in alignment with the way life is. Then you experience life as one long, peaceful journey in which you're noticing what the problem is or what the problems are at any one time, and watching with fascination to see how they change or what they turn into. Of course, that doesn't mean you do nothing. You still call the dentist. You can still argue with the receptionist when you say it's an emergency and she says there's no such thing as a dental emergency. You can argue for the best possible time. What will be different is that you're doing it peacefully. And firstly, because you're doing it peacefully, you'll get the benefits for yourself. And secondly, you'll get the benefit of a more accommodating response from the receptionist. So instead of her resisting and punishing you for being rude and aggressive, she might be more sympathetic and accommodating. You might be surprised at what you find out when you try that. The key difference is that you're not thinking and believing that when this problem goes away, then life will return to being perfect or will somehow become perfect. You're recognizing that there's always something, and this is today's thing. So you're acting 100% and allowing 100% at the same time. Another way to put this is you do everything that you can in a situation, and you don't do everything that you think you need to. Or you don't do everything you think you need to just because you think it. What do I mean by that? Another example, let's say you're managing a project and it's got many moving parts and many people involved. And so you are very concerned about everything happening in just the right way, at just the right time. And because you believe it's all up to you to act and control, you get a little bit over-involved, a little bit over-concerned, and so you end up micromanaging everybody. Or if you perhaps you recognize that that's not so good for the people involved, so you internalize that, and then you have the worry and anxiety. Now, if you remember that you don't beat your own heart, breathe your own lungs, work your spleen, all that stuff, if it was up to you, that you'd be dead in 10 minutes. And so all that stuff takes care of itself. Well, similarly, outside of you, things take care of themselves. If you remember as well that if everybody is paying attention, committed to the goal, present enough, paying attention enough, then problems will rise to the surface and will be dealt with. When you take those two things into account, this opens up the possibility for you to allow at 100%. At the same time, you can act 100%, but instead of going hammer and tongs at everybody and everything, you can decide what needs your attention, what can you and should you control right now. And so you almost rein yourself in and put your attention on what you can do, on what does matter, and you act within the limits of your power. So instead of deluding yourself that the whole world depends on you having your attention on its problems and being the hero, you limit your perceived level of power and influence. You don't act on those compulsions to micromanage or to worry yourself awake at night. In other words, you don't do everything that you think you should do just because you think it. You focus on what you can do, and at the same time, you allow things to unfold as they will. And so that's the important bit. You allow for problems. You allow them to surface. You allow them to be dealt with. And you don't revert back to the bad and good judgments and panic phase every time a problem does arise and start going crazy trying to find a solution and put things in place to prevent it ever happening again. You're recognizing the problem arose, we caught it, we dealt with it, great. Let's keep our attention where it needs to be. So as you can see, equanimity is about giving up that control that you think you have, but also not flipping into the opposite, where you think you have no control and you have to be all shoo like that hippie. It's about shifting from that black or white either or thinking into the possibility of a both and thinking and finding that dance between yourself and reality. It's also not about looking on the bright side of things, because when you are that determined optimist and you're over-identified with being the optimist, you can also be a little bit in la-la land and not recognize when you do need to stop flogging a dead horse or make some tough decisions. So it's not about that. It's about recognizing the fact that things change by themselves, that problems arise and can be taken care of, and that you need to have your attention where it is, and that interpretation of things as good or bad is not always that accurate. So that's equanimity in a nutshell. It's a big topic, and if you'd like to know more, there's an article on my blog called Equanimity, a Word for Our Time. The link is in the credits to this video. And then if you'd like to take that further and perhaps develop equanimity as a competence, as a stable personality trait even, then I'd invite you to take part in the masterclass, which is also available via the shop page of my website, link below as well. I'm sure you'll find great benefits in that. So thank you. I'm Neil Beerbaum, signing off. Don't forget to subscribe. and go forth and be equanimous.